That evening when I went out to dinner with my daughter and son-in-law. When I went to the restroom, an old woman approached me, pressed a stack of money into my hand, and whispered, "Run. Right now. Don't look back." I thought she was crazy, until she said one thing about my son-in-law that shocked me speechless. And when I turned back to look through the restaurant window, I saw my son-in-law standing still, staring straight at me, smiling. I couldn't move. My whole body was numb. I'm truly grateful you're here with me. Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Also, please note, this story includes some fictional elements added for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real names or places is purely coincidental, but the message behind it is meaningful and worth reflecting on. When my daughter invited me to dinner at the most expensive restaurant in Portland, I thought it was a celebration. I thought she'd finally forgiven me for all the years I couldn't give her more. I was wrong. That October evening would shatter everything I believed about my family. But standing in the doorway of Le Pigeon watching candlelight flicker across white tablecloths, I didn't know that yet. Rachel stood when she saw me. For the first time in years, her smile looked real. "Mom," she pulled me into a hug that actually felt warm. "I'm so glad you came." I held her a beat longer than necessary, surprised by the sudden affection. Rachel and I hadn't been close, not since her father died, not since I'd told her I couldn't help with the down payment on her condo. We'd barely spoken in 6 months, but tonight was different. Tonight she was glowing. "Mrs. Hayes." The man across from her stood extending his hand. My new son-in-law. I'd only met him once 3 weeks ago at their courthouse wedding. "It's an honor. Rachel's told me how hard you worked to give her everything." His grip was firm, his smile polished. Handsome in a careful, expensive way. "Call me Evelyn," I said, settling into the chair he pulled out for me. The waiter poured champagne. We toasted. For a few minutes, I let myself believe this was real, that my daughter had found happiness, that maybe we could rebuild what we'd lost. "Your house must be worth quite a bit now," my son-in-law said, cutting into his steak. "The Pearl District's become so desirable." "I suppose so." I set down my glass, but I'd never sell. Too many memories. Something flickered behind his eyes. Quick, cold, then gone. "Of course," he said smoothly, "though you should think about estate planning. Make sure everything's protected for Rachel when the time comes." The words were reasonable. His tone was polite, but something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. "Estate planning," I repeated. "Just a thought." He smiled. "We all want our loved ones taken care of." I glanced at Rachel. She was staring at her phone under the table, her thumb scrolling fast. Too fast. "Rachel, everything all right?" "Fine." She set the phone down quickly, her laugh a little too bright. "Everything's perfect, Mom." But her hands were shaking. I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself to stop looking for problems. Rachel deserved to be happy. I should be happy for her. Then his phone rang. "Excuse me," he said, kissing Rachel's temple before standing. "Work call, just a minute." He walked toward the bar phone pressed to his ear. I turned back to Rachel, but before I could speak, I felt it the weight of someone staring. I looked across the dining room. An old woman sat alone in the corner, small, frail. But her eyes were locked on mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. She wasn't just looking at me, she was staring. Her hands gripped the edge of her table like she might collapse without it, and her face pale drawn held an expression I couldn't quite name. Fear, that's what it was. Raw, desperate fear. "Mom," Rachel's voice pulled me back. "You okay?" Yes, just need the restroom." I stood smoothing my dress and walked toward the back hallway. My heart was pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. The old woman was just a stranger. Probably confused. Probably nothing. But as I passed her table, I heard the scrape of a chair. I glanced back. She was standing, moving toward me. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came out. Only her eyes, wide, terrified. And somehow, without a single word, I understood exactly what she was trying to tell me. "Run." I didn't make it 3 steps before her hand closed around my wrist. The grip was surprisingly strong for someone so frail. I gasped, turning to find the old woman from the corner table, standing inches away, her face pale and drawn in the dim hallway light. "Please," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, you have to listen to me." "I what?" I tried to pull back gently, my heart hammering. "Ma'am, I think you're confused." "I'm not confused." Her other hand pressed something into my palm, something thick. I looked down and saw cash, a wad of bills, 20s and 50s, bound with a rubber band. "Take this. Call a taxi. Right now." "I don't understand." "The bathroom." Her eyes darted past me toward the dining room, then back. "There's a window. Small, but you can fit. Climb out. Don't let him see you leave." My mouth went dry. "Let who?" "Your son-in-law." The way she said it made my stomach drop. Not polite, not careful, like she was spitting poison. "He can't know you're gone until you're already safe." I shook my head, trying to process. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but my daughter died 3 years ago." Her voice cracked. "Her name was Susan. Susan Foster. She was 32 years old, and she married that man before your daughter did." The hallway tilted. "What?" I breathed. "His first wife. They said she drowned." The old woman's hands were trembling now, clutching mine with desperate strength. "In the Columbia River. The police called it. They said she'd taken her own life, that she'd been struggling, depressed. But I knew my daughter. She wasn't." Her voice broke. "She was terrified of him. She told me she'd found something, records, proof that he'd done it before." "Done what before?" I whispered, though part of me already knew. "This." She squeezed my hand tighter. "All of it. The charm, the marriage, the money, and then—" She stopped, her face crumpling. "She's gone. My baby's gone, and I couldn't prove anything. The police wouldn't listen. Everyone thought I was just a grieving mother who couldn't accept the truth." My head was spinning. This couldn't be real. My son-in-law, the man who'd shaken my hand an hour ago, who'd toasted to family he couldn't have. "He's going to do the same thing to you," the old woman said, her voice raw. "I saw you with him tonight. I saw the way he looked at you when you mentioned your house. I've seen that look before. On Susan's wedding day, 3 months before she died. This is insane." I managed, but my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. "You're saying that he's some kind of—" "I'm saying you're in danger." She pressed the money harder into my hand. "This is everything I have. $2,000. It's enough for a taxi, a motel somewhere safe while you figure out what to do. But you have to leave. Now. Before he realizes I've warned you. I can't just— Rachel's out there and my daughter. Your daughter married him 6 weeks ago." The old woman's eyes were wet. "Susan lasted 4 months. Please, don't wait to find out how long you have." Before I could respond, she turned and walked quickly back toward the dining room, disappearing into the low murmur of conversation and clinking silverware as if she'd never been there at all. I stood frozen in the hallway, the cash heavy in my hand, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not from the dining room, from behind me. I turned. 2 men in dark suits stood at the far end of the hallway. Tall, broad, not restaurant staff. Their eyes locked on mine, and one of them took a step forward. My breath caught. I looked back toward the dining room. Through the archway, past the tables and candles, I saw him, my son-in-law, standing near the bar phone still pressed to his ear. And he was smiling right at me. I didn't think. I ran. Into the bathroom. Slammed the door. Locked it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the bolt. Outside, I heard footsteps quickening. Heavy. Deliberate. The window, I climbed onto the sink, my dress bunching around my knees. The window was small, just like she'd said. Too small. But I shoved it open anyway, cold October air rushing in, and I didn't care that I was 65 years old, didn't care that my hands were scraped and bleeding as I pulled myself up. I only cared about one thing: getting out. The drop was longer than I expected. I squeezed through the narrow bathroom window, my dress catching on the frame, and fell hard into the alley below. Pain exploded through my right ankle. I gasped, pushing myself up from the wet pavement palms, scraped and bleeding. The alley smelled like grease and rain. Dumpsters lined the brick walls. Somewhere beyond, I could hear traffic voices, laughter, ordinary Friday night sounds in Portland. Behind me, through the wall, came knocking. "Mrs. Hayes," a man's voice unnaturally calm. "Please open the door. We just want to talk." The politeness made it worse. It was the tone of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't wait. I limped toward the street, every step agony, the old woman's cash clutched in my purse. $2,000, enough to run. But for how long? The street was busy, cars passing, people walking. I raised a shaking hand. A yellow taxi pulled over. "Where to?" the driver asked as I collapsed into the back seat. "Northwest 11th. I gasped. "Near Couch Street, the flower shop." My shop, where I kept a spare key, where I could think. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay, ma'am?" "Fine," I lied. "Please drive." He nodded and pulled into traffic. I pressed low in the seat, trying to control my breathing. The old woman's words kept replaying. "My daughter died 3 years ago. Her name was Susan. She married your son-in-law first. She's gone because of him, and you'll be next." I pressed my palm against my mouth, holding back a sob. Rachel. My daughter. Did she know? Had she known all along? No, she couldn't. But I remembered how she'd stared at her phone during dinner, how she'd avoided my eyes, how her laugh had sounded too bright, too forced. What if she does know? The taxi turned a corner. I twisted to look back. There, standing under the streetlights outside Le Pigeon. My son-in-law, phone pressed to his ear, perfectly still, watching. He knew I was running, and he wasn't worried at all. My phone buzzed, a text from Rachel. "Mom, where did you go? He says you left without paying. What's wrong with you?" I stared at the words, tears blurring my vision. Left without paying. That's what he'd told her. That I'd caused a scene. Not that I was in danger, that I was the problem. I couldn't reply. The driver pulled up outside my shop, dark closed. I handed him 2 20s and climbed out, ankle throbbing. Inside smelled like soil and roses. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. I locked the door and limped to the back office. I needed my bank card. Needed to know if I still had access to my money. The ATM was 2 blocks away. I walked there in the dark, jumping at every shadow. I slid my card in, entered my PIN. The screen flickered. Account restricted, contact bank. No, I tried again. Same message. I pulled out my phone and dialed customer service. "Thank you for calling. Current wait time is approximately 45 minutes. I hung up. 45 minutes. I didn't have that. I didn't have anything. I stood alone on the dark street, rain falling harder, staring at my useless card. He'd already started. Whatever he'd done to Susan, he was doing it to me now, taking control, cutting me off, making me look unstable. And I had no idea how to stop him. I tried the ATM one more time. The screen flashed the same message, account restricted, contact bank. My hands shook as I dialed the customer service number printed on the back of my card. After a long hold, a woman's voice came on the line. "Mrs. Hayes, your account was frozen this afternoon at the request of your spouse." "I'm a widow," I said. "I don't have a spouse." There was a pause. "Our records show a marriage certificate filed with Multnomah County on September 3rd of this year." "That's impossible. I've been widowed for 12 years. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but until you provide documentation proving otherwise, the freeze remains in effect." I hung up. My chest felt tight. The rain had started again, cold and steady. I called Rachel. "Mom." Her voice was sharp. "Where are you?" "Rachel, someone froze my bank account. They filed a fake marriage certificate. I need your help." "Mom, you're not making sense. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but something's wrong. Very wrong." "Mom, you've been forgetting things lately. Maybe you should come home and rest." "I didn't forget anything. Someone is doing this to me." "Mom, please, just come home." I ended the call. I had no choice. I flagged another taxi and gave the driver my address on Northwest Flanders Street. The ride cost $20. I had $1,800 left. When the taxi pulled up to my house, I saw the porch light was on. That was odd. I always turned it off when I left. I walked up the steps and tried my key. It didn't fit. The lock had been changed. I knocked. A man in his 30s opened the door. He looked confused. "Can I help you?" "This is my house," I said. "No, ma'am, I'm renting this place. Signed the lease 3 weeks ago." "That's not possible." He disappeared inside and came back with a folded document. I scanned it. My signature was at the bottom, notarized on September 28th. But I never signed it. "There must be some mistake," I said. "I don't know what to tell you, ma'am. My neighbor, an elderly man I'd known for 15 years, stepped out onto his porch. He looked at me with something close to pity. "Evelyn, are you all right?" Before I could answer, a car pulled up. My son-in-law stepped out calm and collected. He walked toward me slowly. "Evelyn," he said, his voice smooth, "what are you doing here?" "This is my house." "Not anymore." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and handed it to me. Inside was a property transfer form signed by me, dated September 28th, the same day as the lease. "You signed this 3 weeks ago," he said. "You told us you wanted to downsize. Don't you remember?" I stared at the signature. It looked exactly like mine. "I never signed this." "You did, Evelyn. Rachel was there. So was I." Rachel stepped out of the car. She wouldn't look at me. "Mom, you've been confused lately. We talked about this." "No, we didn't." My son-in-law put his hand on Rachel's shoulder. "We're just trying to help you. You're stealing from me." He didn't flinch. "We're protecting you." Rachel finally met my eyes. "Mom, please, just let it go." They walked past me into the house that used to be mine. The door closed behind them. I stood on the sidewalk, soaked and shaking, holding $2,000 in cash and nothing else. The motel room smelled like mildew and cigarette smoke. I woke up on a sagging mattress, my ribs screaming with every breath. The fall in the alley last night had done more damage than I'd realized. Each inhale felt like a knife twisting between my bones. I sat up slowly, bracing myself against the headboard, and looked around. The wallpaper was peeling in long strips. The carpet was stained with things I didn't want to think about. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting yellow shadows across the room. This was what my life had become in less than 24 hours. I counted the cash on the nightstand, smoothing out each damp bill. $1,847. I'd paid $65 for the room, $25 for the taxi from my house to this place, and $15 for a dry sandwich and bottled water from a gas station on the way. The cashier had looked at me like I was homeless. Maybe I was. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? My daughter and her husband stole my house and emptied my bank account. They'd ask to see the paperwork. I'd show them the property transfer, the lease agreement, the marriage certificate, all with my signatures, and they'd nod politely and suggest I see a doctor, a geriatric specialist, someone who could help me with my confusion. That's what Rachel had called it, confusion. I wasn't confused, I was trapped. I opened my old laptop, the one I'd used to manage my flower shop's invoices for 15 years. The screen was cracked in one corner, but it still worked. The motel Wi-Fi was weak, but after 3 tries, it connected. I typed into the search bar, "Susan Portland, death 2021. The first result was an obituary from the Oregonian. Susan Marie Foster, 32, of Portland, Oregon, was found in the Columbia River on September 19, 2021. Authorities reported she had been struggling in the months prior to her passing. Her husband stated she had not been herself. Services were held privately. She is survived by her mother, Diane Foster, of Northeast Portland." I read it 3 times, each word sinking in deeper. 32 years old, found in the river. Her husband said she'd been struggling. I clicked on another article, this one shorter and more clinical. Woman's body recovered near Kelly Point Park. No signs of foul play. Investigation closed within 48 hours. No signs of foul play. But the old woman at Le Pigeon, Diane Foster, had looked me in the eyes and told me her daughter was gone because of him. She didn't say accident. She didn't say struggling. She said he'd taken her daughter's life. And now he was coming for mine. I searched for Diane Foster's address. It took a few tries switching between white pages sites and public records databases, but I finally found her. Northeast Ainsworth Street, apartment 2B, 2.3 miles from the motel. I stared at the screen. Maybe she was grieving and desperate, clinging to a story that made sense of her loss. Maybe she was dangerous. But she was the only person who had tried to warn me. The only person who had seen what was happening before it was too late. I closed the laptop and stood up, every muscle in my body protesting. My reflection in the cracked mirror looked like someone I didn't recognize. Gray hair tangled and matted dark bruises blooming under my eyes. My left ankle swollen and purple where I'd twisted it climbing through the bathroom window. I leaned closer to the glass and whispered, "You're 65 years old. You've survived worse than this. You raised a daughter alone. You built a business from nothing. You can get through this." I wasn't sure I believed it, but I said it anyway. I pulled on a clean shirt from my overnight bag, stuffed the cash into my purse, and grabbed my coat. The rain was still falling when I stepped outside, colder now, drumming against the cracked asphalt. The parking lot was empty except for a few rusted trucks and a man in a stained jacket smoking under the overhang. He didn't look up. I stood there for a moment, rain soaking through my hair, looking at the gray sky. If Diane's daughter had been taken from her because of him, then Rachel could be next. Or maybe Rachel already knew. Maybe she'd been part of it from the beginning, playing the role of the loving daughter while he pulled the strings. Either way, I had to know the truth. Because if he'd done it once, he would do it again. The house on Northeast Ainsworth was smaller than I expected. It was a narrow duplex with faded blue siding and a cracked concrete step. The mailbox had been dented probably by kids with baseball bats. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, rain dripping from my hair, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Then I knocked. The door opened. Diane Foster stood there, older and thinner than she'd looked at the restaurant, but her eyes were sharp. She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You came," she said. "I wasn't sure you would believe me." "I didn't," I said. "Not until my bank account was frozen and someone stole my house." She stepped aside. "Come in." The apartment was small and cluttered with photographs. They covered every surface, the mantel, the bookshelf, the coffee table. All of them showed the same young woman. Dark hair, bright smile, holding a college diploma, standing on a beach, laughing at a dinner table. Susan. Diane poured 2 cups of tea and sat down across from me. Her hands were shaking. "Susan met him in the spring of 2019, she said. "He told her his name was Marcus Webb. He was charming, polite. He brought her flowers every week. They were married by February of 2020. "That's fast," I said. "Too fast." Diane's voice cracked. "The first month was perfect. Then things changed. He started controlling her schedule, checking her phone. She couldn't see her friends without asking permission. When I tried to talk to her about it, she said I was being dramatic. I thought of Rachel, the way she'd looked at me across the dinner table at Le Pigeon, the way she'd turned away when I stood on the sidewalk outside my own house. 6 months after the wedding, Susan noticed money missing from her account," Diane continued. "Small amounts at first, then thousands. She confronted him. He said she'd authorized the transfers and must have forgotten. He showed her documents with her signature." My chest tightened. "Just like mine. Just like yours." Diane stood and pulled a leather-bound journal from a drawer. She handed it to me. The cover was worn, the pages dog-eared. "This is Susan's diary," she said. "I found it in her apartment after she was gone. The police wouldn't look at it. They said it didn't prove anything." I opened it. The handwriting was neat, careful. I flipped to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. "March 10th, 2021. He's not who he says he is." I found records in his office, 3 women before me. All of them gone. All of them called accidents. I don't know what to do. If I go to the police, he'll know. And if he knows... The entry stopped there. "She was going to report him," Diane said quietly. "She told me on the phone. 2 days later, she was found in the Columbia River. The police said she'd been struggling. They found a prescription for antidepressants in her apartment. They closed the case in 48 hours. You didn't believe it. Would you..." I looked at the photographs on the wall. Susan in a graduation gown. Susan holding a puppy. Susan smiling at a camera, her whole life ahead of her. "I went to the police," Diane said. "I brought them the diary. I told them about the money, the documents, the 3 women. They said I was a grieving mother seeing conspiracies where there were none. They said there was no evidence of foul play. So you waited," I said, "you waited until you saw him again. I've been watching for 2 years. Her voice was steady, now cold. "I knew he'd do it again. Men like him always do. When I saw him at Le Pigeon last night with your daughter, I knew. Either she's helping him or she's the next one after you." I set the journal down. My hands were trembling. "I don't know which is worse," I whispered. Diane didn't answer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a photograph. It was me, standing outside Diane's building, gray coat soaked through hair, plastered to my face. The angle was from across the street, taken through the rain. 5 minutes ago. Someone was watching me. The knock came hard and fast, 3 sharp blows against the door. I'd spent the night on Diane's couch, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. Now it was Monday morning, 10 o'clock, and someone was pounding like the building was on fire. Diane looked at me, her face pale. "Don't open it." But I already knew who it was. I opened the door. Rachel stood there, eyes red and swollen mascara smudged down her cheeks. She looked like she hadn't slept either. "Mom," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, I need to talk to you." Diane stepped closer, her voice low. "Don't trust her." Rachel pushed past me into the apartment. She threw her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. I stood there, stiff, my arms at my sides. I didn't hug her back. "Mom, I'm so sorry about the other night," she said, pulling away. I was confused. "He told me you were having memory problems, and I believed him. I should have listened to you." "I don't have memory problems, Rachel." I know that now." She wiped her eyes. "I talked to him. He admitted he made a mistake. We want to fix this. We want to make it right." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder, at least 30 pages, held together with a black clip. She set it on the coffee table. "This is a corrective deed," she said. "It transfers everything back into your name. The house, the accounts, everything. You just have to sign here." I opened the folder. Page after page of legal jargon-dense paragraphs in 8-point font. My name appeared over and over, highlighted in yellow. Diane snatched the folder out of my hands. She flipped through it quickly, her eyes scanning the fine print. Then she looked up at Rachel, her expression cold. "This isn't a corrective deed," Diane said. "This is a general power of attorney. She's trying to trick you." Rachel's face went blank. "Who are you?" "I'm someone whose daughter trusted the wrong man." Rachel's jaw tightened. She turned to me. "Mom, this woman is lying to you. She's manipulating you. Can't you see that?" "Get out," I said. Rachel stared at me. "What?" "Get out of here, Rachel, right now." Her face twisted. She grabbed the folder, tore it in half, then tore it again. She threw the pieces on the floor like confetti. "Fine," she spat. "You're so selfish, Mom. I needed your help, and you never cared. You never cared about anyone but yourself." "Help with what?" I asked. She didn't answer. She turned and stormed toward the door. But before she left, I saw her eyes flick down to my purse on the chair. The old house key was sticking out half visible. Her gaze lingered on it for just a second. Then she was gone. The apartment was silent except for the sound of rain against the window. Diane knelt down and started picking up the torn pieces of paper. She smoothed one out on the table, then another. She fit them together like a puzzle. "Evelyn," she said quietly, "look at this." I leaned over. On the back of one torn piece, written in blue ink, was a note in Rachel's handwriting. "How much longer until she signs everything I need, that money now?" Below it was a date stamp. 3 days ago, Friday, October 13th, the day before the dinner at Le Pigeon. I stared at Rachel's handwriting for a long time. How much longer until she signs everything I need, that money now? 3 days before the dinner at Le Pigeon. 3 days before she'd hugged me and told me she loved me for the first time in years. It had all been planned. I looked up at Diane. "I need to get the original documents, the deed, my will, the bank records. They're in a safe in my bedroom." "That's too dangerous," Diane said. "I need proof. Without it, I have nothing." She didn't argue. She knew I was right. We waited until Tuesday afternoon. The tenant who'd taken over my house worked downtown, usually home by 6. At 4 o'clock, Diane drove me to Northwest Flanders and parked 2 blocks away. "I'll wait here," she said. 15 minutes. If you're not back, I'm calling the police." I nodded and got out. The house looked the same from the outside. The porch light I'd installed 5 years ago. The rose bush I'd planted when my husband was still alive. But it wasn't mine anymore. I walked around to the back. The gate was unlocked. I pulled out the old key and slid it into the back door. The lock clicked open. They'd changed the lock on the front, but not this one. Inside, everything was different. My furniture was gone. The walls had been repainted. A stranger's coats hung in the hallway. I stood there for a moment, feeling like a ghost in my own home. Then I moved toward the stairs. The safe was in my bedroom on the 2nd floor, hidden behind a panel in the closet. If I could just get there, grab the deed and the bank statements, I'd have everything I needed. I climbed carefully one step at a time. My ribs still ached from the fall in the alley. At the 10th step, I heard a voice above me. "What are you looking for, Mom?" I froze. Rachel stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, her face cold. "Rachel," I said quietly, "I just need to get my documents." "You should have signed when you had the chance." She started down toward me. I took a step back. "Rachel, please, you made this so much harder than it had to be." She was 3 steps above me now. I could see her eyes. There was nothing in them. No warmth, no recognition, just calculation. I took another step back. My heel met the edge of the stair. "Rachel, don't." She moved toward me. I felt her hands just for a second, and then I was falling. My back hit the stairs. Pain exploded through my ribs. My head cracked against the hardwood floor at the bottom. The world went white, then gray, then black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The lights were too bright. My whole body felt like it had been shattered and reassembled wrong. A doctor stood over me, shining a penlight into my eyes. "Mrs. Hayes, can you hear me?" I nodded barely. "You have 2 fractured ribs and a mild concussion. You're going to be in a lot of pain for a while, but you'll recover." Rachel sat in the chair beside the bed, her hands folded in her lap. When a nurse came in to check my vitals, Rachel's face transformed. She leaned forward, eyes wide with concern. "Is she going to be okay?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling. I tried to catch her, but she fell so fast. The nurse patted her shoulder. "She'll be fine. You did the right thing bringing her in." The nurse left. Rachel didn't look at me. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling. That night, they gave me morphine for the pain. It made everything soft and distant, like I was underwater. I drifted in and out of sleep. Sometime after 10, I heard Rachel's voice in the hallway. She was on the phone. "Yeah, she's awake. Don't worry. Tomorrow we'll take her home. Then we'll finish this." A pause. "I know, I'm handling it." She hung up. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding against my fractured ribs. "Tomorrow we'll take her home. Then we'll finish this." I had to get out, tonight. The nurses changed shifts at 3 a.m. I pressed the call button. A young nurse appeared, her face tired under the fluorescent lights. "I need to use the restroom," I whispered. "Please, I can't hold it." She hesitated, then helped me sit up. The pain in my ribs was so intense I saw stars. Every shallow breath felt like a blade slicing through my chest. She steadied me as I shuffled toward the bathroom, one arm over her shoulder. Inside, I locked the door and called Diane. "I need you, emergency exit, 10 minutes. She didn't ask why. I waited by the bathroom window. When the nurse's footsteps faded, I slipped out into the dim corridor. Each step sent fresh waves of agony through my chest. I pushed through the emergency exit. Cold October air hit my face. Diane stood beside a wheelchair. She wrapped her coat around my shoulders and helped me into the seat. Every movement felt like my ribs were grinding together. I bit down hard to keep from crying out. "Can you make it?" she whispered. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. We took the service elevator down. Diane helped me into her car. I had to brace myself against the doorframe, ribs screaming, and we drove into the night. Every pothole, every turn, my ribs screamed. I gripped the door handle, breathing in shallow gasps. Diane glanced over. "We can go to the police right now." "Not yet." My voice was hoarse. "We need proof, the notebook." "You can barely sit up." "I don't have a choice." We stopped at a 24-hour diner on Southeast Hawthorne. Diane ordered coffee. I couldn't drink mine. My hands shook too badly. "Tell me what happened," she said. I recounted the fall, Rachel's cold stare, the phone call I'd overheard. "She's awake. We'll take her home tomorrow. Then we'll finish this." Diane's face hardened. "We need to get into his office," she said. "Tonight." "How?" She pulled out a small silver key. I took this from Susan's belongings 3 years ago. She'd made a copy of his office key. She was going to gather proof. 2 days later, she was gone. I stared at the key. "Where?" "Northeast Grand Avenue, Suite 3B. Small building, no security cameras inside." "What if he's there?" "He won't be. He only goes during business hours." We rested at Diane's apartment until evening. I lay on her couch, ribs aching with every breath. Diane brought tea painkillers, a blanket. I took the pills but couldn't relax. At 9 o'clock, we left. By the time we reached the office building, I was shaking from pain, from cold, from fear. Diane helped me out, one arm around my waist. Each step up the stairs felt like my ribs were splitting open, but I kept moving. Because if I stopped, I'd never start again. Diane unlocked the side door. We stepped into a narrow hallway that smelled of stale coffee and cheap carpet. Suite 3B was on the second floor. We climbed slowly. Every step was agony. Inside the office was sterile, bare desk filing cabinet, no nameplate. A framed painting hung behind the desk. Diane lifted it. Behind was a small steel safe with an electronic keypad. 4 digits, she said. Try his birthday. She shook her head. I don't know it. He lied about everything. I thought for a moment. Try 1955. Why, your birth year. If Susan loved you, maybe she used it as a clue. Diane entered the numbers. The lock beeped green. The door clicked open. Inside, cash 3 passports. Marcus Webb, Daniel Morrison, Robert Carter, all with his face, and a black leather notebook. I opened it. The first page read Marcus Webb, alias Daniel Morrison, Portland Project. I turned the pages. Target profile. Entry point, timeline, bank accounts, legal documents. Then a final line, loose ends eliminate if necessary. My hands trembled. Diane pulled out her phone and began photographing the pages. Then we heard footsteps in the hallway. The door handle started to turn. I searched the desk first, pulling open drawers one by one. Papers, pens, a phone charger, nothing with numbers. No sticky notes, no calendar with dates circled in red. Whoever worked here kept no personal traces. Diane stood by the door listening for footsteps in the hallway. Hurry, she whispered. I stared at the safe. 4 blank digits on the digital keypad. Thousands of possible combinations. I tried Rachel's birthday first, August 15th, 0815. The keypad beeped red and stayed locked. I tried the house address, 1847. The lock beeped red again. Diane leaned closer. Try the day Susan died, September 18th. I entered 0918. Another red beep. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she said softly, try 1955, my birth year. I looked at her. Why would he use? Just try it. I entered 1955. The lock beeped green. The bolt slid back with a soft click. The door swung open. Inside the safe was a thick stack of cash bound with rubber bands, 3 passports stacked neatly, and a black leather notebook. I pulled everything out and set it on the desk. The passports had different names, Marcus Webb, Daniel Morrison, Robert Carter, but all 3 had the same photograph. My son-in-law's face stared back at me from each one, calm and expressionless. I opened the notebook. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. The first page was written in neat, controlled handwriting, every letter perfectly formed. Marcus Webb, alias Daniel Morrison, Portland Project. I turned the page. Target profile. Evelyn Hayes, 65, widow. Assets, Victorian house. $1.2 million savings. $200,000. Vulnerability, isolated. Only child. Strained relationship with daughter. My stomach dropped. I felt like I was reading my own autopsy report. The next page was worse. Entry point. Rachel Hayes, 38, unmarried. Online gambling addiction. March 2023. Total debt $287,450. Psychological profile, low self-esteem. Seeks external validation. Deeply resents mother. Easily manipulated through financial pressure. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. Diane leaned over my shoulder reading. Her breath caught. Oh my God. I turned the page. Timeline. June 2023, first contact, Stumptown Coffee, Northeast Broadway. July to September. Build trust. Romantic relationship established. October, first marriage ceremony. October 10th, debt payment $287,450. Full leverage acquired. October 14th, dinner with primary target Le Pigeon. October 15th to 30th, secure signatures, transfer assets. November to December, liquidate property, close accounts. January 2024, exit to Phoenix, new identity, Robert Carter. Every step had been planned. Every word, every smile, every touch had been calculated months in advance. I kept reading, my heart pounding. The next 2 pages listed bank account numbers, property deeds, and forged legal documents. All of it mapped out like an architect's blueprint. Then I reached the last page. Loose ends. Mother Diane Foster monitor, low threat. Primary target, Evelyn Hayes, eliminate if necessary. I stared at those 3 words, eliminate if necessary. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every page, every line, every number. My hands were trembling so badly the first few photos came out blurred. I steadied myself and tried again. Diane whispered, "He planned all of this, from the beginning. Rachel was just a tool," I said quietly. "He found her debt and used it to control her. Do you think she knows what he is?" I thought about the coldness in Rachel's eyes when she pushed me down the stairs, the phone call in the hospital hallway. "Tomorrow we'll take her home. Then we'll finish this." "I think she knows now," I said. I stuffed the notebook into my coat. Diane grabbed the 3 passports and the cash. That's when I saw it. A small black camera mounted in the corner above the door. A tiny red light blinking steadily. "Diane," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Look." She turned. Her face went white. Then I heard it. A soft electronic beep from somewhere inside the wall. A motion sensor. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy, fast, getting closer. Diane grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my sleeve. "Someone's coming." The door handle started to turn. The door swung open. My son-in-law stood there. Marcus. That's what the notebook called him. Rachel stood behind him, her face pale under the fluorescent hallway light. Marcus held up his phone. "I installed a motion sensor. It alerted me 20 minutes ago." Rachel's eyes locked on mine. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I held up the black notebook. "Learning the truth about him, about Susan." Rachel looked at Marcus. "Who's Susan?" Marcus smiled, cold, sharp. "A problem from the past. You'll be one too, eventually." Rachel flinched. Marcus took a step forward. "Give me the notebook, Evelyn." Diane moved in front of me. "Run, I'll hold him." "You're not going anywhere," Marcus said. He shoved Diane hard. She stumbled backward, her head hitting the edge of the desk with a sickening crack. She crumpled to the floor and didn't move. "Diane," I screamed. Marcus stepped over her. "The notebook now." I turned and ran. My fractured ribs screamed with every step. I burst through the door and into the hallway, clutching the notebook against my chest. Behind me, I heard Rachel's voice, confused and frightened. "What are you doing? What's happening?" I didn't stop. I hit the stairwell door and started down, taking the stairs 2 at a time. My ankle twisted. Pain shot up my leg. I kept going. Behind me, I heard Marcus's footsteps, fast, heavy. Then I heard Diane's voice, faint but clear. "Evelyn, don't look back." A struggle. Sounds I couldn't identify. Then silence. I reached the ground floor and shoved through the exit. The street was dark and empty except for a single taxi idling at the corner. I ran toward it, waving my arm. The driver rolled down his window. "You okay, lady?" "Please, I need to go now." I gave him Diane's address and collapsed into the back seat. Through the rear window, I saw Marcus standing in the doorway of the building phone, pressed to his ear, staring directly at me. The taxi pulled away. I looked down at the notebook still clutched in my hands. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You have 24 hours to return the notebook. If not, what happened to Susan will happen to Diane." My chest tightened. I stared at the message, my hands shaking. Diane had stayed behind. She'd grabbed his ankle. She'd given me time to run. And now he had her. I thought about Susan, found in the Columbia River, ruled an accident, no signs of foul play. I thought about Diane's face when she'd handed me the key. I'd been too afraid to use it. She wasn't afraid anymore. I dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. 911, what's your emergency? I need to report an assault. I said, my voice steady, despite the fear clawing at my throat. A woman was attacked at 1427 Northeast Grand Avenue, Suite 3B. She needs an ambulance. Is the attacker still on scene? I don't know. Maybe. Are you safe? For now. Stay on the line, ma'am. Officers are on the way. I took a breath. I also need to report a murder from 3 years ago, and I have evidence. There was a pause. What kind of evidence? Documents, passports, a detailed plan. The man who did it is named Marcus Webb, or Daniel Morrison, or Robert Carter. I don't know which one is real." Another pause. "Ma'am, where are you right now?" I gave her the intersection. The taxi driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes wide. "Stay where you are," the operator said. "An officer will meet you there." I hung up and stared out the window at the passing streetlights. Diane had told me to run, so I ran. But I wasn't running anymore. Diane had given me the lawyer's number before everything happened. Thomas Green, elder law specialist, 52 years old, salt and pepper hair, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was on the 3rd floor of a brick building downtown, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and coffee. I sat across from him, the black notebook and printed photographs spread across his desk. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. I told him about the dinner at Lepesian, the old woman's warning, waking up to find my bank account frozen and my house stolen, Rachel pushing me down the stairs, the office break-in, the notebook. Thomas flipped through the photographs slowly, his face unreadable. "This is elder abuse," he said finally. "Fraud, identity theft, and likely murder." He looked up at me. "This is enough. We'll file for an emergency temporary restraining order today, asset freeze, no contact order, and a full police report." "What about Diane?" I asked. Thomas picked up his phone and made a call. He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Diane was taken to the hospital last night," he said. "Head trauma, but she's conscious and alert. She's giving a statement to the police right now." I felt something loosen in my chest. She was alive. Thomas set the phone down. "I'm calling the district attorney. With this evidence and Diane's testimony about Susan, they'll move fast." He dialed again. This time the conversation was longer. I watched his expression shift, focused, then sharp, then something close to satisfaction. He hung up. "The DA wants an expedited hearing," he said. "Trial starts Monday." Monday? I stared at him. That's only 4 days. In cases with imminent danger and clear evidence, the court can fast-track the process. But you need to be ready. You'll testify. Diane will testify. The notebook, the passports, the financial records, all of it goes in front of a judge. I nodded. "I'm ready." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "There's something else you should know. The police went to the office last night after your 911 call. They found Diane. They also found Marcus, or Daniel, or whatever his real name is. He tried to run. They arrested him at the airport with a ticket to Phoenix and a passport under the name Robert Carter." I exhaled. "So he's in custody. For now. But his lawyer will push for bail. We need to make sure the judge sees him as a flight risk." "He has 3 passports," I said. "He's been doing this for years. How is that not enough?" "Yes, it is," Thomas said. "But we have to prove it. That's what Monday is for." I looked down at the photographs on his desk. Susan's face in Diane's apartment, Rachel's handwriting in the notebook, the timeline, the plan. "What about Rachel?" I asked quietly. Thomas's expression softened slightly. "That's complicated. She's not in custody. The police want to question her, but she hasn't been charged with anything yet. It depends on what she knew and when she knew it." I thought about Rachel standing in the office doorway, her face pale and confused. Who's Susan? Maybe she really hadn't known. Or maybe she had and she'd chosen him anyway. Thomas stood. "Go home, rest, stay somewhere safe. I'll call you tomorrow with an update." I left the office and walked out into the cold October morning. My phone rang. Rachel. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Mom," she whispered. Her voice was shaking. "I need to tell you something about the money, about why I—" The line went dead. I waited. She didn't call back. Monday morning, the courthouse was cold and gray. I stood outside the courtroom, my legs shaking. Thomas put a hand on my shoulder. "You're ready," he said. I wasn't sure I believed him. Inside the room was packed. Reporters sat in the back rows, notebooks open. Strangers filled the benches. People I'd never seen before, all staring at me as I walked down the aisle toward the front. At the defense table sat Marcus, calm and composed in a black suit, his hands folded on the table. Rachel sat beside him, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't look at me. Judge Margaret Hartwell, 58, gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun. Black robe, sharp and crisp, rapped her gavel once. The room went silent. Thomas leaned close and whispered, "Technically, this is a preliminary hearing." but the judge agreed to expedite. If the evidence is clear, she can rule today. I nodded, my mouth dry. Prosecutor Jessica Brennan, early 40s, dark suit, sharp eyes, stood and called my name. The state calls Mrs. Evelyn Hayes to the stand. I walked to the witness box, every step echoing in the silent room. My ribs still ached. My hands were trembling. I placed them flat on the wooden railing and took a breath. Jessica's voice was calm and steady. Mrs. Hayes, please describe what happened on the evening of October 14th. I told her. The dinner at Le Pigeon. The old woman's warning in the hallway. The escape through the bathroom window. My bank account frozen by morning. My house stolen, occupied by a stranger with a lease I never signed. Jessica nodded. Did you sign the property transfer document? No, I said. Someone forged my signature. Jessica held up a document and turned to the judge. Your Honor, handwriting analysis by a certified forensic expert confirms the signature on this document is not Mrs. Hayes's. Marcus's lawyer stood, a thin man in a gray suit with sharp features. Isn't it true, Mrs. Hayes, that you've been experiencing memory problems? I looked straight at him. No, but the defendant wanted people to believe I was. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Jessica stepped forward again. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to present additional evidence. She placed a series of photographs on the overhead projector. The black notebook appeared on the screen, page by page. The target profile, the entry point, the 12-month timeline. This notebook, Jessica said, her voice clear and unwavering, details a 12-month plan to systematically defraud Mrs. Hayes of her home, her savings, and her autonomy, using her own daughter as the entry point. The courtroom went completely silent. Rachel stared at the screen, her face stricken with horror. She looked at Marcus. He didn't look back. He sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Jessica continued. The defendant identified Rachel Hayes Morrison's gambling debt $287,450 and used it to manipulate her into facilitating elder abuse fraud and identity theft. She held up another image, a text message in Rachel's handwriting. How much longer until she signs everything I need, that money now? This message, Jessica said, was sent by Rachel Hayes Morrison 3 days before the dinner at Le Pigeon. 3 days before she hugged her mother and told her she loved her for the first time in years. Rachel's shoulders shook. She covered her face with her hands. Marcus sat perfectly still. Jessica turned back to the judge. Your Honor, the state has one more witness, a testimony that is critical to this case. Judge Hartwell looked up from her notes. Call your witness. The state calls Diane Foster. The courtroom door opened. A woman walked in, frail but steady each step, slow but deliberate. Her head was wrapped in white bandages. Her left arm hung in a dark blue sling. But her eyes were sharp, burning with something I recognized immediately. Resolve. Diane. She walked toward the witness stand, her gaze locked on Marcus. He stiffened. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw something flicker across his face. Fear. Diane reached the stand and placed her good hand on the Bible. The bailiff swore her in. Then she looked at Marcus, then at me, and I knew this was the moment everything would change. If you're still here, comment 3 below so I know you're standing with me. And tell me if you were sitting in that courtroom watching everything unravel. Would you feel anger first or heartbreak? What happened next changed everything. And just a gentle note, the next part includes some dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. While not every detail reflects real events, the themes explored are meaningful and worth reflecting on. If this isn't your kind of content, you're free to stop here. Jessica's voice was steady when she began. Please state your name for the record. Diane Foster. Mrs. Foster, how do you know the defendant? Diane looked directly at Marcus. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. He married my daughter Susan in 2020. A year later, she was found in the Columbia River. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Rachel stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Who's Susan? Judge Hartwell's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Sit down, Mrs. Hayes Morrison, now. Rachel sat, but her eyes were wide, darting between Marcus and Diane. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. I looked at her. She really hadn't known. Jessica turned back to Diane. Mrs. Foster, do you believe your daughter's death was a suicide? No, Diane said. Her voice was stronger now. I found her diary after she died. She wrote that she'd discovered his real identity and was planning to report him to the police. Jessica stepped forward and placed several documents on the overhead projector. Forensic report, she said clearly. The medical examiner noted bruising on Susan Foster's body that was inconsistent with accidental drowning. The image appeared on the screen. I couldn't read all of it from where I sat, but I saw the highlighted sections. The words blunt force trauma and defensive wounds stood out. Jessica continued without pausing. Bank records show that Marcus Webb withdrew $450,000 from Susan Foster's personal account 2 weeks before her death. The entire account was emptied. Another document appeared on the screen. Withdrawal slips, account statements, transaction logs, all bearing Marcus's signature. Neighbor's statement, Jessica said. A witness living next door reported hearing screaming from the residence on the night Susan disappeared. Police were not called. Rachel was shaking now, her hands pressed flat on the table in front of her. Jessica turned to face the full courtroom. The defendant's real name is Marcus Webb. He has used at least 4 documented aliases in 5 different states over the past 15 years. Before Susan Foster, there were 3 other women all found dead in so-called accidents, shortly after transferring their assets to him. The room was completely silent. Rachel's voice broke through like glass shattering. "That's not true. He wouldn't—" She looked at Marcus, her face desperate and pale. "Tell them it's not true. Tell them." Marcus said nothing. He sat perfectly still, his face as cold and expressionless as stone. Rachel collapsed into her chair, sobbing openly. Jessica turned to her, her voice softer now. "Mrs. Hayes Morrison, did you know about Susan Foster before today?" Rachel's voice came through tears. "No, I didn't know anything. He told me my mother was sick, confused, that we were helping her, that we were protecting her." "And the debt?" Jessica asked quietly. "The $287,000 in gambling debt." Rachel nodded, her shoulders shaking. "I couldn't pay it. I tried. He said he'd take care of it. I didn't know what he wanted in return. I didn't know about any of this." Jessica looked at the judge. "Your Honor, Rachel Hayes Morrison was manipulated through financial desperation. However, she facilitated elder abuse fraud and physical assault. The state will recommend leniency in exchange for full cooperation and testimony." Judge Hartwell rapped her gavel once. "This court is in recess. We will reconvene at 4 o'clock for closing arguments and sentencing recommendations." The bailiff stood. Everyone rose. Rachel sat frozen in her chair staring at Marcus. He didn't look at her, didn't speak, didn't move. I watched her, my daughter. The child I'd raised alone after her father died, the girl who'd hugged me at Le Pigeon and told me she loved me, the same girl who'd pushed me down the stairs and left me bleeding on the hardwood floor. She'd been used, manipulated, just like me. Marcus had found her weakness, the debt, the shame, the desperate need for approval, and he'd exploited it completely. But she'd made her choices. She'd signed the papers. She'd lied to my face. She'd pushed me, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. After the recess, something changed. Marcus dismissed his attorney and announced he would represent himself. He stood before the judge, his posture straight, his voice calm. "I wish to make a statement," he said. Judge Hartwell nodded. "Proceed." Marcus turned to face the courtroom. "Susan Foster discovered my records. She threatened to report me. I had no choice." The room went completely silent. He continued, his voice steady and cold. "People like Evelyn Hayes, like Susan, they hoard resources while others struggle. I was simply redistributing wealth, taking from those who had more than they needed." There was no emotion in his voice, no remorse, no regret. I felt my chest tighten. He truly believed what he was saying. Jessica stood. "The state calls Rachel Hayes Morrison." Rachel walked slowly to the stand, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Mrs. Hayes Morrison." Jessica said gently, "Please tell the court how you met the defendant." Rachel's voice was barely audible. "I owed money, a lot of money. Online gambling, $287,000. I was desperate." "How did you meet Marcus?" "At a coffee shop, Stumptown on Northeast Broadway. He seemed perfect, kind, attentive. He listened to me." She paused. "Then he paid off my debt. All of it. I didn't ask where the money came from. I should have, but I didn't. What did he tell you about your mother? Rachel's voice broke. He said her mind was failing, that she was forgetting things, that we needed to protect her assets before she made bad decisions. I believed him. What did he ask you to do? Sign papers, transfer accounts, get her to sign documents. Rachel looked at me, tears streaming down her face, until I pushed her down the stairs, and I realized what I'd become. Jessica returned to her table. No further questions. The judge called for jury deliberation. Thomas leaned close to me. 2 hours is fast, that's a good sign. We waited. 2 hours later, the jury returned. The foreperson, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair, stood. In the matter of the state of Oregon versus Marcus Webb on the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Susan Foster, we find the defendant guilty. A murmur ran through the courtroom. On the charges of attempted murder fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and criminal conspiracy. Guilty on all counts. Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. The foreperson turned to the second case. In the matter of the state of Oregon versus Rachel Hayes Morrison on the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud. Guilty. Assault in the second degree. Guilty. Rachel's shoulders shook. Judge Hartwell rapped her gavel. Sentencing will proceed immediately. She looked at Marcus. Mr. Webb, you have shown no remorse for your actions. You have exploited vulnerable women, stolen their assets, and taken at least one life, likely more. You are a danger to society. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus's expression didn't change. The judge turned to Rachel. Ms. Hayes Morrison, you were manipulated through financial desperation. However, you facilitated elder abuse and physically harmed your own mother. I sentence you to 10 years in the Oregon State Correctional System. You will be eligible for parole after 7 years. Rachel turned back to look at me. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with tears. Mom, she whispered, I'm so sorry. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. The bailiff stepped forward. All rise. They led Marcus and Rachel toward the side door. Marcus didn't look back once. He walked out with the same calm, expressionless face he'd worn throughout the trial. But Rachel did. She looked back at me one last time. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw her as she used to be. The little girl who picked dandelions from the yard and brought them to me, calling them roses. The child who'd held my hand crossing the street. Then the door closed. She was gone. 6 months later, I drove to Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Wilsonville. It was the first time I'd visited Rachel since the trial. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. Why was I doing this? What did I hope to hear? I parked in the visitor lot and sat in silence for 10 minutes before I could make myself get out. The visitation room was cold. Plastic chairs bolted to the floor. Security cameras mounted in every corner. A guard stood by the door, arms crossed. Rachel sat across from me in an orange jumpsuit, thinner than I'd ever seen her. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup. She looked older. She stood when she saw me. She reached for a hug. I didn't hug her back, but I didn't step away either. We sat down. Rachel's voice was small. Mom, I don't know where to start. Then don't, I said. Just tell me the truth. When did you know? When did you decide I was someone you could throw away? Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't want to hurt you. The debt, he said, if I didn't help, they'd hurt me. Kill me. I was so scared. So you chose him over me. Rachel was silent for a long time. Then she said, yes, I did, and I'm so sorry. She reached across the table. I didn't take her hand, but I didn't pull away either. That evening, I went to Diane's apartment for tea. How did it go? She asked. Hard, I said. She apologized, but I don't know if I can forgive her. Diane poured the tea slowly. You don't have to, not now, maybe not ever. But she's my daughter. And she hurt you, Diane said gently. Both of those things are true. I looked down at my cup. How do you do it after Susan? Diane was quiet for a moment. I don't forgive Marcus. I never will. But I'm learning to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner, for not protecting her. She looked at me. Forgiveness isn't about them, Evelyn. It's about you, whether you can carry it or whether you need to put it down. I nodded. I didn't have an answer yet. Back at my new apartment, small quiet mine, I opened an old photo box I'd rescued from storage. I found a picture of Rachel as a child, maybe 5 years old, laughing in the backyard. Her hands were full of dandelions. I placed it on the mantelpiece. Then I sat at the desk and wrote a letter. Dear Rachel, I love you. I always will, but I don't trust you. I don't know if I ever will again. Forgiveness takes time, maybe years, maybe never. I need you to understand that. I'm not writing this to hurt you. I'm writing it because it's the truth. Maybe one day I'll be ready to mail this. Maybe not. Mom. I folded the letter and put it in the desk drawer next to the photo of Rachel as a child. I didn't mail it, not yet. The next morning, Diane knocked on my door with a bag of pastries and a thermos of tea. Volunteer shift starts at 10, she said. You ready? We'd started working together at an elder advocacy center downtown, helping other survivors navigate the legal system. It was hard work, but it felt like something good growing out of something terrible. We sat at my small kitchen table, planning the day in comfortable silence. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe deeply. Rachel was in prison. Marcus would never get out. My house was gone. My savings were slowly being recovered through the court, but I was still here, still standing. Forgiveness takes time. Maybe one day I'll be ready, maybe not. But tonight I was still standing. And that was enough. Looking back, I see how easily trust can be weaponized. My story is one of many family drama stories that prove love doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it blinds you. Grandma stories like mine aren't rare. We're told to trust family, to forgive quickly, to stay silent. But I'm here to say, don't be like me. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't sign papers you haven't read. Don't let shame keep you from asking for help. This journey taught me that family drama stories can have real consequences: lost homes, broken bonds, shattered trust. I learned that older women face unique dangers in family drama stories, especially when money is involved. But grandma stories can also be stories of survival. I survived because I chose to fight even when I was terrified. I leaned on Diane, a stranger who became my lifeline. And I learned that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's a choice I make for myself, not for others. If there's one thing I believe, it's that God put people like Diane in my path for a reason. She lost her daughter, yet she saved me. That's grace. So here's my advice: protect yourself, trust your instincts, and remember, grandma stories don't have to end in tragedy. They can end in strength. Thank you for walking with me through my journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, sharing what you'd do if you were in my position or faced a similar situation. Your perspective matters to me. If my story resonated with you, please consider subscribing so you won't miss my future stories. A gentle reminder: while my story was inspired by real-world elder abuse cases and social issues, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content isn't your preference, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better.